Good morning, Choose Life Church. Evening, midday, whatever time you're watching this, good day to you. Hey, listen, I'm Al from Choose Life Church, and you know that we are in the midst of a journey in the book of Matthew. And we've been reading one chapter per day, trying to find out who is this Jesus? That's really the question we're trying to answer. Who is this guy? And today we are in chapter 14. So day 14, chapter 14. As the chapter begins, it finds us coming to grips with King Herod. And King Herod has a question he's asking, and he's trying to figure out who this Jesus is. And he says, this must be John the Baptist come back to life, and that is why he can do such miracles. So Jesus was a miracle worker. And Jesus and John the Baptist, they were relatives. They were nearly the same age. They spent a lot of time in ministry together. Although they had their own separate ministries, they were still ministering for God. They knew each other well. They probably grew up together and were very good friends. But there was a point where King Herod made a commitment to his daughter, and she asked for King Herod to behead John the Baptist, really at the request of her mother. So Herod carried this out and beheaded John the Baptist. Now, John and Jesus being as close as they were, this really hit Jesus hard. And Jesus was extremely sad. The Bible talks about Jesus being a man of sorrows. And Jesus came to earth in order to understand the human condition. He truly understood sorrow. And it talks about that when he heard about John the Baptist being beheaded, he went off by himself. He just wanted to be with his Father and spend time communing with him and in prayer. So Jesus understood sorrow. He understands my sorrow. He understands your sorrow. A man of sorrows. Not only a miracle worker, but a man of sorrows. Well, before Jesus got back to land on the boat that he went out on to spend time with his Father, people had heard he was in the region, and they began to gather. By the time he came back to shore, there was this huge multitude of people. It could have been somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 20,000 people easily. Now you have to remember that back in those days, all they knew or all they had was word of mouth. That's the only way they could find anything out. But I think what this represents is that Jesus in his time was a rock star. People wanted to see him. They wanted to know who this guy is. They wanted to touch him. So nowadays you hear about things like flash mobs, and I'm sure you've heard of that, where people communicate with one another and they agree to meet at a specific place, and they have this group of people that shows up for whatever reason. And it's pretty easy to get a few hundred people together with a flash mob. But what was it like back then without Twitter or Facebook or cell phones or internet? How in the world could you get 20,000 people maybe together in a matter of a couple of hours? That's how well known he was. That's how sought after he was in his time. So Jesus was a miracle worker. He was a man of sorrows. He was a man who spent time with his Father in prayer when he wasn't sure what to do. And he was a rock star. People wanted to see him. They wanted to come and hear from him and learn from him and touch the fringe of his robe and praying and hoping for healing, praying and hoping for a new direction to their lives. So at a certain point, it says that after spending time healing all of these people, and by the way, it says that he healed these people because he was compassionate upon them. He felt compassion for them. So Jesus is a man of compassion. When he sees the needs, he wants to help. He wants to fix. He cares about us. So he spends a great deal of time with them, healing and encouraging and teaching. But at a certain point, it's getting late. So his disciples say, we need to send the people away. They're getting hungry. It's getting late. We need to send them to towns, to their towns, so that they can get food. And Jesus says, well, that's not necessary. And of course, the disciples don't know what he's talking about, since they only have a few loaves of bread and a couple of fish. But Jesus says, that's all right. He takes the loaves of bread and he takes the fish and he holds it up before his Father. And suddenly there's more than enough to feed everyone there and have 12 baskets of leftover. Have you ever been hungry? Have you ever felt like things were just impossible? There was no way out? Well, Jesus is a miracle worker. Jesus is a man. Jesus is God. But he can always help you find a way out. And he does it by lifting his need to the Father in prayer, and the Father takes care of business. And the last story it talks about here is Peter walking on water. And so Jesus, after he goes out to pray once again, after meeting with the people and feeding the 5,000, he comes upon the disciples in a boat in the midst of a storm. And as he approaches them walking on the water, they're very scared. They don't know who this is. And so he says, it's okay, everything's fine, it's me. And Peter says, well, Lord, if it's really you, have me come to you walking on the water. And so Jesus says, come on. So Peter gets out of the boat and he begins to walk toward Jesus, and everything's going fine. But then suddenly he looks around at the waves and at the wind and at the circumstances, and he gets scared and he begins to sink. And he cries out to the Lord, save me. And Jesus grabs his hand, lifts him back up, and they get back in the boat. And Jesus is not only a miracle worker, not only a man of sorrows, not only a compassionate God. He wants to heal us, but he also is a man who sought after the Father always to find out the Father's will, to reconnect with him, to make sure that they were lockstep. And in this instance, he's a Savior. When Peter cries out to him, save me, he saves him. Listen, we just need to continue on with our journey, understanding that in one little chapter, we can find so many attributes of our Savior. So I hope you enjoyed today. Looking forward to our next time together. And I just want to say, God bless you all. Enjoy your day.